Let me ask you something. Do you ever feel like this?
I'm sorry, Mrs. Puff. I know what I did wrong.
We've all experienced some sort of crash before in our lives. Whether it's a crash from some kind of emotional high, a sugar crash, or maybe even just a literal crash. But we aren't talking about any of those kinds of crashes today. What we are talking about is a crash or a relapse in the world of chronic fatigue syndrome. And a quick disclaimer, the Fitness with an Illness YouTube channel should not be taken as medical advice. I am simply one person who has undergone a serious health crisis, and I am trying to learn how to recover from that while sharing hope and encouragement to others along the way. So before we get into a crash from chronic fatigue, let's first define what chronic fatigue syndrome is in the first place. Chronic fatigue syndrome is typically diagnosed once your doctor has ruled out pretty much every other potential diagnosis on the table. And this is usually done through the process of blood tests, seeing specialists, and many other means at your doctor's disposal. Chronic fatigue syndrome, or CFS, is usually characterized by extreme fatigue that lasts for longer than 6 months. Now again, to clarify, we're not simply talking about waking up feeling tired, but then still going and working for 40 hours, coming home, playing with the kids, making dinner, and doing all of your ordinary chores. Chronic fatigue syndrome is a debilitating degree of fatigue, and I emphasize that because for those of us in the CFS community, we're often bothered by the title chronic fatigue syndrome because we feel like it undermines the severity of our condition and vastly underplays just how impactful this condition is on our daily lives. Because the name chronic fatigue syndrome simply implies that we're tired all the time, but there is so much more to this debilitating disease. Now we could use its other name, which is myalgic encephalomyelitis. Myalgic encephalomyelitis. I've been trying to learn how to say that for almost 2 years now, and I still can't say it. And so as a result, most of us in the CFS community simply resort back to the original name it's been given, which is chronic fatigue syndrome. So with that, if chronic fatigue syndrome involves more than just being fatigued, what are some of the symptoms that come along with CFS? Generally speaking, some of the most common symptoms that people will experience are the following: extreme fatigue after physical or mental activity, difficulty thinking, dizziness, muscle or joint pain, and unrefreshing sleep. Now for myself personally, you'll see a little bit of an overlap, but these are what I typically feel with my condition. Extreme exhaustion, brain fog, which is similar to difficulty thinking, nausea, digestive issues, and then twitches and body shakes. Now this is by no means an exhaustive list of my symptoms or of symptoms of people with chronic fatigue syndrome. If you scour the internet, you will find pages of symptoms that people have experienced while battling with chronic fatigue syndrome. But this will at least give us a basic framework to work around in regards to what chronic fatigue syndrome is. So with that, now let's get into what is a crash from chronic fatigue syndrome and how is that different from the day-to-day life of battling with this illness. So a crash is the result of what happens after you have pushed yourself beyond your physical and mental limits. You see, for those of us in the CFS community, we understand that our bodies only have so much energy they can produce, and that we can only handle so much stimulation each and every day. And if we push past this limit too far and too often, we can actually send ourselves spiraling downwards into an even worse state of health. And even once we've recovered from a crash, we can often send ourselves spiraling downwards into another crash if we're not careful. And this can be an extremely discouraging cycle because for most of us, we're always trying to find ways to improve and increase our work tolerance and increase how much energy we can exert each and every day. What happens is if we push too far past that limit, we end up taking a few steps backwards. And so we feel like we're in this constant game of 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, 4 steps forward, 3 steps back. Constantly just trying to claw our way forward, but we can send ourselves spiraling backwards just like that. And the severity of these crashes is going to look different for everyone. However, the common theme is that there is going to be an increase in the severity and the frequency and the number of symptoms that you experience. These crashes or relapses can also take a very long time to recover from, usually anywhere from a few weeks to a few months. My worst crash took me roughly 6 months to fully bounce back from. And I've had a few smaller ones since then, including one about 2 weeks ago. But generally speaking, at least for myself, most of my crashes are on a 3 to 4 week timeline. Now, let me be clear, when I say bounce back, I'm not talking about a full recovery from CFS. I'm talking about bouncing back to the baseline of my condition. This is a place where I'm still feeling my symptoms, I'm still tired, I still can't do all the things I'd like to do, but I'm able to function in some small capacity as long as I tread carefully and don't overload my system. And a crash from CFS is no small matter. It will often leave a person bedridden, unable to accomplish the most basic of tasks. During my worst crash, I spent months in bed and needed help with all kinds of day-to-day activities. My grandparents even came over and helped watch my kids a lot, along with many others, simply because I did not have the energy to get out of bed. These crashes can be extremely humbling and frustrating to go through, but I do feel that the longer I battle with this condition, the more I understand it and the more I learn along the way. I am by no means an expert on chronic fatigue syndrome, but after battling with it for 2 years, I definitely feel like I've learned some things along the way. And one thing that seems fairly clear to me at this point is this. The primary culprit for CFS appears to be a hyperactive or overactive nervous system. Now again, I want to reiterate, if you're watching this, before you assume that a overactive nervous system is the issue you're dealing with, you need to make sure that your doctor has ruled out everything else and has actually diagnosed you with chronic fatigue syndrome. Now, if those things are all true, then from my research on the internet, it seems fairly clear that the nervous system is the primary issue when it comes to chronic fatigue syndrome. Now, if the nervous system is the primary issue, then we should obviously start there. From what I understand, there are 3 main pathways or functions of our nervous system. We're going to talk about 2 of these pathways today. These 2 pathways are our sympathetic nervous system and our parasympathetic nervous system. Now, I know those are 2 really big words, and they're kind of scary sounding, but let me break it down, hopefully into a simple and digestible format. So our sympathetic nervous system is our fight or flight response. This is the part of the nervous system that informs our brains if we're in danger. So for an extreme example, think about if you're on a hike in the woods and you see a bear. Immediately your brain is going to sense the danger, and your nervous system is going to respond by shutting down all non-vital systems in your body. Basically in an attempt to revert all energy to making sure you stay alive. A good way to help us picture this might be to imagine ourselves flying a ship in Star Wars. We often see the heroes in Star Wars distributing the ship's resources throughout the vessel to deal with whatever the current situation is. They may shift all power to the engines for a speedy getaway, reinforce the shields to prevent damage from enemy fire, or increase the range of their scanners to get a feel of the local area. This is kind of how our nervous system works when we are in a flight or flight response. When we see that bear, our brain says, "Oh no, there's a threat. In order to shift all of our attention towards survival, I'm going to shut off all non-essential functions." And so what happens is our body may shut off our digestion, raise our heart rate, or tense our muscles, all as a means of protecting ourselves from the impending danger. It's honestly a pretty fascinating response that our body goes through. But here's where the problem lies with CFS. Our nervous system has designated this survival or sympathetic state as our default mode or function. And the result of never turning off this mode can have serious negative effects on our health. Living in this prolonged state of survival is not only stressful, but horrible for our health. And what happens over time is our body begins to perceive everything around us as a threat. Suddenly, if you get up to do the dishes, your body perceives this simple everyday task as a threat. Instead of seeing that pile of dishes, your brain sees a bear. And for those of us with chronic fatigue syndrome, our nervous system perceives everything around us as a threat. Going for a walk, loud noises, bright lights, just simply too much activity, and so on and so on. Each of these scenarios are now perceived as threats. And this is where we need to learn to activate our parasympathetic nervous system and help our body realize that we are not actually in danger. You see, the parasympathetic nervous system is considered to create a state of rest, digest, and repair. This is where our body does all of its healing and where it solves any problems that might be going on. The problem is that for many of us, our bodies are rarely in this state, and as a result, our bodies are not being repaired very often. And our modern world of being on the go nonstop often keeps us in a sympathetic state for much longer periods of time than we should be. And for those of us with CFS, we are on the extreme end of the spectrum, where not only are we stressed, but our body is responding in such a way that is trying to protect us from harm. And this is where we end up crashing. After we've spent too much time in this sympathetic state, our body simply says, "Hey, that's too much," and essentially starts to shut down, forcing us to be in bed with a wide range of symptoms as a form of protecting us from danger, even though there is no real danger. So the question then becomes, how do we shift our body from a sympathetic state to a parasympathetic state? But before I answer this question, I have to give a little disclaimer about my own health. You see, I decided to make this video because I recently had a crash myself. And right now, I'm about 2 weeks out from my initial crash day, and probably about 3 weeks by the time this video posts. And I'm finally starting to feel like I'm reaching my baseline again. I want to begin my answer by simply expressing that I am not a master of my nervous system. I am not a master of chronic fatigue syndrome. And if you're watching this video and you have chronic fatigue syndrome, I'm still fighting through this just like you. I'm just trying to take the little pieces of information that I've learned, apply them to my own life, and then offer that as encouragement to others out there on the internet. So I'm really just trying to say that this is not a magic cure. I am still currently dealing with chronic fatigue syndrome. With that clarification out of the way, let's talk about some ways that we can activate our parasympathetic nervous system. First and foremost, one of the easiest things you can do is to slow down your breathing. Specifically, what you want to do is to ensure that your exhalation is longer than your inhalation. You see, when your exhale is longer than your inhale, it sends a message to our nervous system that we are no longer in danger. Think about if you're in a stressful situation, what kind of breathing are you going to be doing? Are you going to be doing this? Or are you more likely doing this? More than likely, we're hyperventilating. And unfortunately, when that's going on, we're not bringing enough oxygen to our lungs and organs. But if we slow down our breath, it tells our body that we're safe and that we don't need to stress right now. So next time you're in a stressful situation, try taking a few moments to slow down your breath and tell your body that you're not in any danger. Another way to activate your parasympathetic nervous system is to spend time in nature. Scientists have actually been able to measure that if we spend time in nature, it lowers our blood pressure, calms down our body, and simply makes us feel better. There's a reason there's been such a trend for hiking in recent years. We all go out into nature and we feel better. Literally. A while back, my wife and I even stayed in a treehouse because going for a hike isn't necessarily an option for me right now. But it was a really nice way to get a little break away and spend a little bit of time in nature. So if you're able to, find a way to get outside to go for a walk, camping, or even just sit outside and look at nature. Spending time with pets is another great way to calm your nervous system. Our furry little friends have a way of calming us down and actually help relax our nervous system. There's something about petting these little fur balls that makes us so happy. So grab your cat or your dog and give them a big hug. For this next tip, I'm going to lump a few different activities together because they all kind of serve the same function. Singing, humming, and gargling all activate the parasympathetic nervous system by means of vibrations. These vibrations in our vocal cords actually directly interact with our vagus nerve. This is the nerve that runs from our ears, down our jaws, our neck, and into our spinal cord. And this nerve is the primary component of our parasympathetic nervous system. And as a result, these simple activities do a phenomenal job of activating that part of our nervous system and calming down our body. And I mean, really, if you think about it, if you're being chased by a bear, the last thing you're thinking about is probably singing your favorite song. So if you want to activate your parasympathetic nervous system, sing your heart out in the shower, hum to your favorite tune, and maybe gargle for a few extra seconds after brushing your teeth. And a few final rapid-fire things that you could do to calm your nervous system are the following: meditation, massage, and light exercise. And there are many more ways out there that you can calm your nervous system. Just do a quick search on the internet, and I'm sure you'll find something that works for you. Okay, so now that we've talked fairly extensively about our parasympathetic nervous system, how does this actually apply to our crash? Well, quite simply, after a crash, our nervous system is in a hypersensitive state, and we need to progressively work on calming down our nervous system response in order to allow our body the chance to rest and repair. The longer we stay in survival mode, the longer it's going to take for our body to heal itself. So we need to do everything in our power to give our body the chance to do its job. Remember, even though your nervous system is in a hyperactive state, we need to learn to trust it and listen to its warnings when we're being overstimulated. For those of us with CFS, if you start to feel symptoms, this is your nervous system telling you that your body is experiencing too much stimulation and you need to give it a chance to rest and recover. Our body is not our enemy, even though it can feel like it sometimes with all of our symptoms. We just need to learn to work in harmony with this amazing piece of machinery that we've been given. A few other final tips I would give you about bouncing back from your crash would be the following. Pace yourself. This is a hard one, I have to admit, and if you were to ask anyone in my family, they would tell you I struggle with this one a lot. It can be difficult when you've been resting for nearly 2 years to force yourself to rest even more on the days when you're actually feeling decent. Pacing yourself even in these moments must be a priority in order to continue seeing progress in your condition. You need to reintroduce activity into your life slowly and take baby steps in everything that you do. Trying to make large leaps and bounds is only going to set you back 12 steps. And also, when you rest, make sure that you're actually resting. Here's what I mean. My doctor recommends putting on a sleep mask and some noise-canceling headphones and just laying in bed like this for about 10 to 15 minutes a few times a day. And this is a way of cutting off all stimulation from your body and giving your body a chance to truly rest. But even if you're just lying in bed, remember that even simple things like scrolling through social media can activate a stress response. We often unknowingly scroll through social media for a larger part of our lives than most of us would like to admit. And I think we all know that social media, although it is great and has its uses, can be a huge detriment to our health, and especially our stress response. So don't spend too much time with technology. And actually, while I'm on that note, even things like TV or video games can create a stress response in our bodies. I'm a casual gamer, but I recently put some pretty strict parameters on my gaming just to reduce the amount of time that I spend looking at these screens, and therefore hopefully reducing the amount of time that these devices are causing a stress response in my body. So ditch the device when possible, grab a book, a crossword puzzle, listen to some relaxing music, play a board game, or just simply do something that you enjoy. And just remember that as we close up, nothing I've presented in this video is a cure. These are just simply things I've learned in my own battle with chronic fatigue syndrome that have helped me, and I hope that they can aid you in your own health journey. My hope is that this video has accomplished 2 things. 1, that I explained what a crash from chronic fatigue syndrome is and looks like, and 2, given some practical steps you can take to come out of your crash. If you feel that I've done these 2 things, I would really appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel. It really helps support the work that I'm doing and allows me to invest more time into these videos and hopefully help more people along the way. And lastly, my friends, I just want to thank you so much for spending part of your day with me. I hope this video was an encouragement to you, and if it was, maybe share it with a friend who you think needs encouragement as well. Now turn off your devices, go spend some time relaxing and healing your body. Take care of yourselves, and we will see you in the next one.